Afternoon. It is 1 o'clock, so we will get started. Welcome to webinar 2 in the series Microtransit versus Micromobility. What is the difference between microtransit and micromobility? The city of Fort Collins, Colorado will provide an example today of its micromobility spin program, and the state of Kansas Mobility Management will share the KANcycle program today as well. We will hear about how to do the following today, not only having details about micromobility. SUMC will kick us off with their learning module on micromobility. We'll talk about how to prepare for micromobility options in your community. We will talk about how micromobility can integrate into established transit systems and how micromobility benefits commuters in your community, and how you can have diverse mobility options to fill your transportation gaps.
Today, we'll be joined by FTA's Technical Assistance Network, whose joint mission is to promote mobility for all Americans through the provision and coordination of transportation services. The goals of the Coordinating Council on Access and Mobility, or CCAM, is an interagency partnership established in 2004 by the executive order to coordinate the efforts of federal agencies that fund transportation services for targeted populations. And we are supported by several technical assistance partnerships, of which NADTC, NCMM, National RTAP, and SUMC are sharing this information and have coordinated together to bring this micromobility first workshop today to you. The National Aging and Disability Transportation Center, NADTC, is funded by FTA and ACL to promote the availability and accessibility of transportation options that serve the needs of people with disabilities and seniors and caregivers, with a focus on Section 5310 programs. NCMM, or the National Center for the Applied, NCMM, or the National Center for Mobility Management, focuses on establishing partnerships and increasing social determinants of health. National Rural Transit Assistance Program focuses on addressing the technical assistance needs of rural and tribal programs and the state RTAP programs. And then SUMC works to achieve equitable and affordable options for shared mobility options. TACKLE, the Technical Assistance Coordination Library, is funded by FTA and exists for organizations to use to find transportation coordination resources from a diverse range of transportation technical assistance centers. All of the centers submit and use materials, and you're welcome to access it, and it's available for your use. So today, we'll start off with
Hi, I'm Jeremy Johnson Miller. I am introducing Alvaro today. Alvaro joins us from the Shared Use Mobility Center, or SUMC. Alvaro leads the work of the Federal Transit Administration's Mobility Innovation Programs and Grants, providing technical assistance to transit systems or agencies across the country to develop a wide array of innovative mobility projects. So turning it over to you, Alvaro.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, and the whole team. It's my pleasure to be with you all today. I'm calling in from Kansas City, and it's great to see that there's many people around this area also attending this meeting. So starting today, I want to present some approaches to micromobility as part of our work with the Shared Use Mobility Center. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Shared Use Mobility Center, or SUMC for short, we're a non-for-profit organization working in the public interest. We work across different modes of transportation, always keeping public transit as a backbone of a multimodal transportation system. And we're working to replace a car-centric transportation with people-focused shared mobility to fight climate change, promote equity, and strengthen communities. So for today's presentation, I'm going to focus a little bit on what is micromobility as part of this webinar series. This is a very summarized version of what is shared micromobility. We currently understand it primarily as a combination of bikes, e-bikes, and e-scooters. I would say there are other organizations that use broader definitions of what is considered micromobility, including different types of motorized devices that can be used for individual people, and even organizations like NAPSA, the North American Bikeshare and Scooter Share Association, define micromobility of everything that could fit within a bike lane. So that's a little bit of the range of the definition for what is considered micromobility, but for the sake of simplicity, we're going to focus today on bikes, e-bikes, and e-scooters. So let me introduce you to a couple of resources where we learn more about these modes. So the Shared Use Mobility Center hosts a learning center where there is learning models talking about kind of the one-on-one for this mode, as well as providing case studies for these different modes, either bike share or electric scooters. One tool that we have developed in partnership with the New Urban Mobility Alliance and the World Resource Institute is the Micromobility Policy Atlas. And this is a fantastic resource to kind of track a little bit of how different municipalities and transit agencies almost all over the world have been implementing and regulating micromobility in terms of permitting, in terms of guidelines, and other different type of policies and regulations for micromobility projects. So this is a good resource, to consult if you looking for either general resources or peer cities to compare with. SUMC has also been working on a series of applied research projects looking at micromobility. Some of them focusing on equity component for shared mobility. We have a recent study looking at how bikes and e-scooters have been contributing or affecting climate change goals. That is the first report you see here, Bikes and Scooters on the Road to Net Zero, as well as the Sharing in Action report that tracks the impacts of micromobility in a series of local climate change plans. I think that there's about 40 plans that we survey and tracked and study and came up with some patterns and good key takeaways. And last but not least, SUMC was the lead author for the TCRP report on transit and micromobility, which also provide great resources on this question. So we're gonna move a little bit into the work we do with transit agencies and thinking about transit and micromobility integration. And the first, this first slide, it brings, this question of why, or what's the impact and what's the value of integrating or adding micromobility to transit systems and mobility ecosystems in different communities. So as you can see here in two maps, the one on the left shows the lines for existing fixed road buses services in Miami. And the other one, the one on the right, shows the destinations that people can reach and have been reaching through the use of micromobility devices. So as you can see here, it provides more access to more destinations. It doesn't run on a schedule, and it can be accessed in many cases either 24/7 or extended period of hours, depending on the local regulations on the micromobility service. So one of the reasons why this is a very interesting trend in the industry is the possibility to expand the access and the catchment area for transit service. So a couple of examples here. The Shared Use Mobility Center have worked with Capital Metro in Austin, Texas, in fully integrating their bike share program into the portfolio of the transit services that the agency offers. So they went from work in collaboration with the local non-for-profit organization that used to run the bikeshare program into making metro bikes now, rebranded, part of the transit system and the transit agency management. So this has been a very successful case in integrating bikeshare to the portfolio of a transit agency. We have also been supporting a series of transit agencies that are involved in different capacities with their integration with micromobility options. Again, either in some cases it's exclusively regular bikes, in other cases it's bikes and e-bikes, and in other cases it's bikes, regular bikes, e-bikes, and scooters serving these areas. As you can see here, there are agencies of different sizes and in different contexts, ranging from LA Metro in Metro Los Angeles to CATA in rural Pennsylvania, or even Spokies in Oklahoma City. So this is a very interesting forum that we host in supporting transit agencies that are currently managing, involved in some different capacity, their bike share programs or the micromobility programs, as well as some agencies that are interested in developing their own transit micromobility integration. Just very quickly out of that, the work, gonna mention the case study we put together with the Crawford Area Transportation Authority, and I believe that you're gonna be hearing more details about this in the next webinar of this series. So I'm gonna let the people who are leading that program tell you more about it the next webinar. I'd also like to point out SUMC is working, not funded by FTA, but exclusively in California, funded by the California Air Resource Board, a program called the Clean Mobility Options. And the Clean Mobility Options is funding community needs assessment studies, as well as pilot vouchers for clean mobility options projects that include, micromobility. And it is specifically targeting disadvantaged communities. So one of the benefits of this program is not only providing the funding for the implementation of the projects, but there is a lot of capacity building that we're working with communities that may not be used to work with shared mobility vendors or providers, or sometimes have limited capacity to put together grant applications for to tap into federal money or any other type of programs that could support these new mobility services in their communities. So there's here a capacity building component that is very strategic to serve small and disadvantaged communities across the state of California. So from that program, just want to feature today one of the cases that we are supporting. This is a project with the Shasta Living Streets. This is a local non-for-profit organization in Redding, California. And their approach to bringing micromobility has been focusing not only on the bikes and the stations that you may see in other cases, but also creating a bike depot, which serves as a hub. So they're building, a physical building that will store bikes, but also will serve as a community center that is intended to provide some cycling amenities for the users, but as well as to serve for community meetings and other community purposes. So this is where the integration with micromobility with other community needs activities can be a win-win in terms of investments. The other aspect that I would like to bring up to everybody's attention, in case you're not following some of these trends, is the promotion of electric bikes. As we know, electric bikes, either share e-bikes or individually owned and used e-bikes, have expanded the number of people who are getting into cycling. The e-bikes allow for people to get longer distances with less effort. It's in many cases more accessible to people of different ages. And we're seeing a lot of different models for promoting e-bikes. So the two cases that I'm highlighting here are the case of the city of Denver, who has been providing very successfully some vouchers for individuals to purchase e-bikes at local stores, local bike stores. And it has a very important, I would say that two components that are very important in the way they design this program. It includes additional funding for people of low income, acknowledging the cost of the bikes. And they also include funding for cargo bikes and adaptive e-bikes. So that's a way to make access to this mode of transportation, serving purposes of people that are using for different needs, not just the typical bike, either commuter or for recreational purposes. The second case that I'm highlighting in this presentation are the e-bike lending libraries, and the one that I selected here it's in Vermont, but it's by no means the only one. And e-bike libraries, allow the possibility to people to get familiar with the bikes first of all, kind of building that first step into either cycling for people who are not cyclists or into e-bikes for those people who are not familiar with them, and also the possibility of bringing into the community these resources, maybe taking advantage of some of the incentives that could be provided by states or different local governments, sometimes in partnership with utilities. And then, through this bike library model, maybe with a smaller fleet, your communities can also start building that user base to expand the use of bikes and e-bikes in particular. So the last thing that I want to mention very quickly is that the Shared Use Mobility Center hosts an annual summit. This year is going to be on May 3rd to 4th in Chicago. And there's going to be a couple of sessions addressing micromobility as well. So you're all invited to join us if you're interested in learning more about this topic. So key takeaways from today's presentation. First thing, when we think about transit and micromobility integration, we're also redefining transit and the idea that it's not just buses and cutaway, paratransit, like micromobility can and should be also included in the definition of transit as a way of serving the mobility needs of more people. We have happily seen micromobility projects growing in rural and small urban communities. So it's not anymore limited to the cases of the big cities with vendors making big investments in capital and vehicles. Different sizes of cities and rural areas have been very creative in finding ways to bring this mode to their communities. Strong community support is necessary, and usually it comes, following the leadership of a public figure, either on the public sector, sometimes in non-for-profit sector, but public champion has been critical in bringing these mobility options to the communities. And with that, there has been a growing number of examples and projects to learn from. And today we're lucky enough that we're going to be hearing next from KANcycle and the City of Fort Collins. So looking forward to the conversation with them after these next presentations. With that, I'll drop here my contact information, and feel free to reach out if you have any following questions. Thank you very much. Back to you, Jeremy.
Next, we have Michelle Griffin. She's a mobility manager for North Central Kansas and works closely with all of the public transportation providers in Saline, Ottawa, Cloud, Republic, Jewell, Mitchell, Lincoln, and Ellsworth counties. She has worked in public transit since 2016 and has helped to establish the 81 Connection Fixed Route, the Kansas Rides website, KANcycle Regional Bike Sharing, the Moving Kansas Network, and more. She's also skilled in social media marketing, PR, networking, and travel training. She is most passionate about combining mobility and preserving rural living. Michelle graduated from K-State University with a bachelor's and master's and attends games whenever she can. She volunteers in the community with AMBUCS, 4-H, PTO, coaching, and Special Olympics. As a mom to 5 kids and 2 cats, she is always organizing or planning something. Let's welcome Michelle.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm going to get my slide started, and then we're going to talk micro-mobility in Kansas, what that looks like for us with our KANcycle program. So like Anjali mentioned, I am the mobility manager here in North Central Kansas since 2016. Had a lot of fun helping with a lot of great projects, KANcycle being one of those. So we're going to talk through kind of what KANcycle is, how it came to be, what it looks like, and then be happy to answer any questions as we go along. So a little bit about Kansas Mobility Management. There are 6 of us, and we're spread out across the state. We're in the starred location, so we each kind of have our own region that we call home, and we work within that region for projects, helping agencies moving mobility forward in whatever different way that looks like, depending on the needs and interests of the counties that we serve. And a little bit about public transit in Kansas. So we have about 140 agencies with more than 800 vehicles. We give about 10 million rides annually. A large percentage of that is urban, but we do give about 2.5 million rides in our rural communities. Even though we have that many agencies and that many vehicles, not all of our counties have transit service yet. So we probably have about 10 or so that don't have any service. And so we're working towards figuring that out and moving forward. So transit service is still relatively new across our state. Fixed routes are new, bike sharing is new, micromobility as a whole is new, and we're just continuing to evolve each year and with each service that we add. Something else that's happened recently is Kansas announced their active transportation plan. It's the first revision since 1995. So as you can imagine, there's been a lot of changes that have taken place since then. It's a fairly robust plan. It's just been announced. And so we're just figuring out what the pieces are and how we need to implement those different things. It does explore the needs of people who walk, cycle, use mobility assistance devices, ride scooters, anything that is considered that active transportation plan. So we're excited to see this and then figuring out how to incorporate that into the work that we are doing. There are 6 different areas that this active transportation plan covers. So of course, safety, reducing crashes between pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles, providing equity, so investing in underserved communities, increasing mobility, so any way that we can increase walking, cycling, scooter usage, whatever that looks like, helping community health and vibrancy. So we know that these things help to improve health, environment, quality of life, and they also assist with economic development. And then also focusing on a culture shift and educating the public. So normalizing active transportation as a vital part of our overall transportation system and helping with system longevity. So maintaining and preserving these systems, both for investments and funding sources. So you can see there's a lot of information in this plan, and we really are excited to move it and transportation forward in Kansas. So why bike sharing? So as you know, bike share programs provide a great number of social, economic, and health benefits. So they're flexible transportation. They are there when people need them. They connect to other modes. So here in Salina, where I'm based, our fixed route system has only had bike racks on our buses for about 5 years. So you can tell that we're fairly new to this, but we're learning how to make those connections. Of course, it's important for the reduction of vehicle emissions, lowered road congestion. I don't know about you guys, but again, where we live, cars are everywhere. And how can we move people from those cars into other alternative transportation resources? Helps with affordable daily commutes and ease of accessibility. So there's lots of great benefits to having a bike sharing program, which is why we looked really hard at coming up with an option that would work here in rural Kansas. So KANcycle was born in 2019. It was the first rural bike sharing program in Kansas. And right now we have 80 bikes in 8 communities. So it's very spread out. It's each of the 8 counties that I work with. They each have bikes in their community. They are pedal bikes. We don't have e-bikes or anything like that right now. And you can see from our baskets that this program is sponsored by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas. They're very involved with healthy communities through their Pathways grant program. And we were the lucky recipient of one of those grants, and that's how we were able to start this program. So like I mentioned, we have 8 communities here in North Central Kansas that have bikes. Salina is the largest community in my region, not quite 50,000 people. We have 5 racks of bikes spread out throughout the community, and we really made sure to pick locations that matched up with accessibility and fixed route transportation. So each of the racks that we have are close to a bus stop if they're not at a major transfer point. We also made sure that we kind of spread them out throughout the community. We looked at local resources. So we have one at a grocery store that is really kind of a community hub for that part of town. We have one on a college campus. We have one inside of a park that is has a lot of trails for walking and biking access. We have one downtown that where all 5 of our CityGo buses meet, as well as 81 Connection, another fixed route that we have. So we made sure that we were very specific and very strategic on where the bikes were going to be placed. And then we also looked at the surrounding communities. So Salina is really a regional hub for services. So a lot of those people come into Salina, and we wanted to give back and support those local communities as well. So we were able to get additional bikes for each of these other 7 communities in our region. We based the number of bikes on their population size, and then we worked within the local communities to find the best place to put the rack, what we felt would be the most used or the most accessible. But we also made sure that these were strategic with our fixed route service that ran in 3 of the communities and then was served by other transportation options in the other communities. So Salina has the most bikes, the most racks. The other smaller communities have 5 bikes with 1 rack, and the medium-sized communities have 10 bikes with 2 racks. And they are at a variety of locations within these communities. So downtown areas are very popular where a lot of people are. And then also a couple college campuses. We've got one right outside of the city courthouse. So we really made sure that we had those local connections and worked with those local communities to make this work for them. So how does KANcycle work? It's very easy. You have to download the Movatic app. You choose a bike that's nearby. You can scan the QR code that's on each of the bikes. You can choose different payment options. So we have membership options or incremental, so pay as you go. We have student memberships. We have promotional codes that we do on a variety of situations. And so you just choose your payment options and you rent your bike. We, of course, encourage people to ride safely. So wear helmets, obey traffic laws, ride with traffic, yield to pedestrians, and have fun. And then once they're done riding their bike, they can return it to the rack and end the ride through the app. So it's a very easy process. It does work well. We've had great success with people using the bikes in our area. So a little bit about our pricing. So our pay-as-you-go option is $1.50 for 30 minutes. We have annual memberships that anyone can purchase for $30 a year. That gives you unlimited 1-hour rides. And then we have student memberships for the colleges in our area. and those are $20 annually. Again, gives them 1 hour ride. So as was mentioned, there are a ton of different ways that a bike sharing program can work. And we really looked at all of the different types of programs and chose the program that we felt worked best for us. So on the management side, Movatic handles all of the bike maintenance. They do all of the app work. They handle all of the reporting and all of the payments. So it's really an all-inclusive system. And that was important for us. With a smaller staff and making sure that we were able to meet the needs, but still have the best type of system. So then my role in this is the marketing side, and I have a committee of different people in each of the communities. We meet quarterly. We talk about ideas and things that we can do to promote bike sharing in their communities. And we just kind of do whatever things we feel like would make the most sense. On the funding side, like I mentioned, this is a collaborative partnership between OCCK, who is the primary public transportation provider in this region, and Blue Cross Blue Shield through their Pathways grant. And you can find information about us on our website, which is KANcycle.org, or you can find us on Facebook as well. So we've been operating since 2019, and in the past year, we have worked hard to have integration through the transit app. We have kind of decided in Kansas that we want the transit app to be the primary app that we're working with. And so we're figuring out ways of getting all of our transportation providers in one location just to make it that much easier for any passenger across the state. So we were able to have this integration through the partnership with Movatic, who provides the data feed, and that we give that to the transit app, and they are able to pull us in there. So anyone that's in any of these 8 communities, they can pull out the transit app, they can look at the map, and they can see where the bike stations are located. And then they're able to transition right to the KANcycle Movatic app to check out the bike. This connects us also to the fixed routes, so they can see all of those transit connections within this one app, and they're able to plan their multimodal trip in this one section. We've also been working pretty hard over the past year or so to come up with some different partners. And so one of the things that we added last year was a local discount at a coffee house. So anyone that rides their bike, and it doesn't have to be a KANcycle bike, it can be any type of bike, will get 10% off of their purchase. And then we have also been able to partner with OCCK on free memberships for all of their employees. So it's just a great way of bringing in some other partners. We've got some other ideas about some different partners that we can bring in just for ways of sharing information about bike sharing and getting more people involved. And we like to have a lot of events. So some of the things that we have done in the past couple of years is we've had KANcycle's birthday month. So we've had displays and with balloons and cupcakes in each of the communities, working with a local partner to provide that display. We've given out promo codes for free rides. We've also partnered last year for the first Kansas National Bike Month. And so we offered promo codes and free rides for the entire month of May. And then we also promoted other types of biking events throughout that month. We did the same thing with our Kansas Mobility Week. That is the first week of November each year. We've had 2. And again, we offer free bike rides during that week, as well as a lot of other public transportation events, such as free rides for Election Day, free rides for veterans during that week, public transportation displays. And so we're making efforts to have coordinated information surrounding both biking and mobility and public transit throughout these events. We've also been a part of some local bike rodeos that happen in communities. If you aren't familiar with that, it's a pretty simple event where you work with your local law enforcement. They kind of put together a little bit of a obstacle course for people riding bikes. They get to do that event. There's some safety training and education around helmet wearing and things like that. We were able to provide information around KANcycle and had some games for kids to play and just sharing information about what our program is and how we do it. And then we also look for ways that we can partner with other local events. So a big thing that's happening here in Kansas in May is called our Big Kansas Road Trip. They pick 3 counties in Kansas, and they really promote all of the things that there are to do in those 3 counties. And they really encourage people to travel to those 3 counties during a 3-day time period. And so this time we were lucky enough that 2 of our counties were included in this road trip. And so we were able to share information about the bikes available to rent, and we're expecting to see a lot of usage during that time. So that's really KANcycle in a nutshell. It's a fairly easy program, pretty much all inclusive. We're very proud of the fact that we're able to provide bikes to rural communities that may not be able to have bikes on their own. Movatic is also in Kansas and a couple of other communities as well. So Wichita has a fairly robust program. I think they have about 300 bikes down there, all ran through Movatic. And then Coffeyville, Kansas, very small community down in the southeast corner of the state, came on with them maybe last year. And then we have a variety of other programs throughout the state and bike sharing in a lot of different formats. So you did see Ride KC in the earlier presentation. So of course that's in the KC metro area. And there's a couple of free programs. So Thrive Allen County, again in southeast Kansas, and Manhattan Green Apple Bikes. Both of those people are able to check out bikes at no cost. They're able to return them to different racks throughout the community or different places that take the bikes. So there's a lot of different options for people in Kansas for bike sharing. And we've really tried to incorporate all of those things, plus scooters, plus public transportation, and connecting all of those multimodal trips. And you can find information about all of those options on our statewide resource website, which is Kansas Rides. And so anything about mobility management, anything about public transportation, anything about micromobility in Kansas, you can find here on our website. And there is my contact information as well if you need or have more questions.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Rachel. Rachel Ruhlen is a transportation planner for FC Moves in the city of Fort Collins, Colorado. Rachel has served as a bike ped transit advocate since 2004, including 2 years as the Missouri Bicycle and Pedestrian Federation president. After receiving a master's degree in sustainable transportation from the University of Washington in 2016, changed careers to become a transportation planner, first in Virginia and now in Colorado. With FC Moves, she oversees the city's contract with Spin. Thank you so much.
We apologize. Give us just a minute or so to make sure that she is connected in.
In the meantime, we do have 2 questions. And the first is, e-bikes is a wonderful concept. However, I hear that the return of the bikes to proper bike locations can be a challenge. What are you doing to remedy these types of issues? So please feel free to chime in.
This is Alvaro. I can chime in quickly. I think that it really depends on how the program is, assuming that the e-bike is a part of the bike share program. First, if you have racks or stations, that you're asking people to return to, or even some cities, for example, Chicago, are using public fixtures as an eligible place where people can dock the bikes or lock the bikes too. That's one thing that you can consider by design. In cases where the e-bikes are free floating and people can leave it anywhere, the question there is if your program has a designated area that people can and should leave and park the bikes at. And if not, and people leave it, outside that designated area, many organizations, like either agencies or vendors that deal with this issue, they usually charge an additional what we call rebalancing or relocation fee. So there's a penalty. I mean, you can do it, but there is a penalty, accounting for the time that it takes for staff to go retrieve that bike and bring it back into the eligible riding area and parking area. I hope that this more or less addressed the question. And seems like I go ahead and provide my answer to the second question as well. I'm not sure if it was specific for the KANcycle case, but we have seen not many, but a few bike libraries were created out of citizens donating bike. That is more common, I would say, among bike shops that take care of that type of service. Like they accept bikes donated, and they could either run a bike library themselves, or maybe they're partnering with another organization that is running the bike library. So they will accept the bike donation and then transfer those bikes and add it to the fleet of the bike library. So that's another good model to get some citizens involved in a bike library model.
Thank you so much for answering the question, can citizens donate bikes? And now, Rachel, thank you so much. Please take it away.
Thank you. Sorry, I was running a little late there, coming from another meeting. Let me get to sharing my screen. So since I unfortunately have missed all the previous speakers, I'm not sure what you've all talked about so far. So if I'm going over things that we've already talked about, let me know and I can skip through something. So I wanted to talk about the Fort Collins SPIN program. And so I think this has been, is a really good model, a really good example of what shared micromobility can look like at its best. I feel like we know a lot about what it can look like at its worst. And I'll go into a little bit of the history of, how the industry has changed rapidly. I mean, it's not an old industry, but it's been through some very dramatic changes since scooters landed on our streets in 2017, 18, and 19. So Fort Collins, SPIN has been in Fort Collins since July of 2021. Fort Collins actually has a long history with shared micromobility dating back to the Fort Collins Bike Library in 2008, which was run by the city, contracted with a nonprofit to operate that. And then we had Zaxter bikes for a while, we had Bird scooters for a while, but the city put out an RFP, so it was a competitive process, and selected SPIN on a 1-year contract renewable up to 5 years. And so they launched in 2021. And oops, there we go. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of give a little bit of vocabulary background here. And this is where, if this is all really basic, everyone knows this, just interrupt me and I will skip over this. But so I want to talk about these different models. So you can have station-based or you can have dockless. And so, early on, everything was station-based. When GPS technology is really what enabled us to have anything dockless. And this photo I grabbed from Street's blog somewhere. I grabbed it because even though the e-scooter is fuzzy and blurry off to the side, it's, this is a great example showing both kinds, although, you can have dockless bikes as well as dockless e-scooters. Your system might have bikes, e-bikes, and or e-scooters typically. And then it could be publicly owned and operated, or nonprofit, or privately owned and operated. So just kind of some of the basic background about how these systems work and the different variations. Then you can also have, if it's private, it could be permitted or contracted. So when scooters first appeared on the scene, they were just dumped in cities by many companies with no, just overnight, just kind of guerrilla dumped all these scooters in and started operating with no permission and didn't ask. And some cities let that slide, and many cities said, no, this isn't going to work for us. And so a bunch of cities, immediately came up with some permitting systems or contracted. So if it's permitted, there's, anyone who applies for a permit is then authorized to operate in your city. But if it's contracted, you definitely have a lot more control over who is operating in your city and how they're operating. And so I think more and more cities are moving toward contracted because of that level of control. And then if it's contracted, it could be an exclusive contract, or you could have multiple vendors. In Fort Collins, Spin is our exclusive, we have an exclusive contract with Spin. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the advantages that has provided for us. The advantage of multi-vendor is, you could have more competition, which can spur innovation and lower prices and better service potentially. The advantage of an exclusive contract is that your vendor can really get invested in your community. So we have a fleet size that's we have 900 vehicles, about half e-scooters and half bikes, a little bit more than half e-scooters. We're probably going to adjust that mainly to give some more flexibility as to what the composition of the fleet and the number. I've been talking about the Fort Collins Spin program, but I want to mention Colorado State University is very much a partner in this, and Spin has a contract with the city and it has a contract with the university. The bikes, though, this fleet of 900 bikes and scooters, those are the same. So we don't have these aren't the university bikes and these are the city bikes. It's not like that. They're all the same bikes. Sometimes they operate on the university and sometimes on the city. So this is showing this geofence. Everything's controlled by geofencing. So you can control where a bike or scooter can operate, or how fast it can go, and where it can or can't be parked. So the screen line shows the service area. These little red bits are geofenced one way or another. Typically, they're geofencing things out of the area. So you're not allowed to operate it in certain natural areas or on certain corridors. I'm not sure, that one might be a hole in the surface. I'm not sure what that one is, but the campus is over here where all this activity is going on. And so there's a lot of geofences around the campus that is controlling both how fast devices go and where they can be parked. And that's regulated differently on campus versus off campus. So I have been with Fort Collins for less than a year, and that's my entire experience with shared micromobility. So that's kind of a disclaimer. Is my only experience with shared micromobility is with Spin in Fort Collins. But during that brief period of time, I have learned a lot about shared micromobility, and learned a lot about our program specifically. And I've become a big believer in shared micromobility. Shared micromobility is public transportation. So it complements transit very, very well. It's that first mile, last mile. It's shared micromobility is operating when buses aren't. So you could take the bus to your night shift, but you don't have to worry about how you're going to get home because you could take a scooter or a bike home, even if it's a little bit longer of a ride, perhaps. At least you have that option. I talked a little bit about, it's been this changing landscape. And so these early companies that just dump scooters everywhere, most of them are gone. They didn't last. It's the companies like Spin that were thinking ahead, thinking long-term, thinking toward the future. Those are the ones that are still around. So I want to talk about the vendor. A lot of people have this vision of these scooter companies as they just want to litter the streets with these scooters and make money doing it. That's not been my experience. In my experience, our vendor Spin and the city, we have shared goals. We want ridership. We want this to be a viable transportation option. Both of us are very engaged. It's not just Spin doing all the work. I spend a lot of my time working with Spin, being the liaison between Spin and the city, other city staff, between Spin and the community, putting people in touch with each other. And we, at this point, Spin's been operating for coming up a year and a half. We have a high level of trust with each other, and that's really, really important too. So this is a very good example of a public-private partnership. And the partnership aspect being that the city really, I feel that, from my limited experience, the city really has to put something into it too. To make it a really good system, the city has to put something into it as well. That's mainly my time, but there's some other aspects that the city is putting into this as well. So I have this kind of like, what do vendors want and what do cities want? We both want a partnership. Vendors would like to be exclusive. Vendors would like to have a longer contract because both of those enable vendors to kind of invest in the community. The city wants responsiveness from the vendor. They don't want dead scooters lying around, not being attended to, not being touched. We want reliability, so that this is a reliable transportation option. Vendors would like to have subsidies. Other kinds of transportation systems are subsidized. It's not sometimes the current status is that sometimes that's the case. Often, though, that's not the case. In Fort Collins, we do not subsidize Spin. But there are examples where particularly there's subsidies for people with low income to use the shared micromobility service. The vendor would like to have this is kind of an issue with our first contract because we didn't have that high level of trust that we do now. So that initial contract was kind of micromanaging Spin. And fleet caps are often written into a contract to help control, like if you obey all the rules and your scooters are not in the way and not being a problem, you can have more of them. But if you don't, you don't comply with these rules, and this is more, I think, with permits more so than contracts. But then we might reduce your fleet cap. Otherwise, that's fine. I feel like our fleet size it's like there must be 900, and then that doesn't actually make sense. We need a range so that Spin then has the flexibility to remove bikes for certain weather or in response to ridership. So we need to designate a range for our fleet size rather than an exact number. So the other thing that cities want, we want a community partner, and Spin has definitely been that for us. Spin has a presence at events. They usually have booths at events like Bike to Work Day. They'll have breakfast stations in our open streets events. Spin provides us with bikes and scooters. They will bring bikes and scooters for us to use for tours. A lot of campus tours. Also, we have like 30 mayors from Arkansas visited Northern Colorado, and they all toured the city on Spin bikes. So that was fun. Spin has an adaptive bike library, and this is the only one in the nation that Spin has. It's a Fort Collins that adaptive bike library is free. So folks can reserve one of these bikes and Spin will come drop them off. We have a upright trike, a KANcycle, and a recumbent trike in that fleet. And then there's Spin access. So if you don't have, a bank or credit card, you can use Spin Cash. You can buy a Spin Cash card. If you don't have a smartphone, there's a way you can use Spin with text messaging. And then there's a substantial discount for people with low income. So this is kind of my recommendations to any communities considering shared micromobility, but who might, have some fears about how's this going to work? What is this going to mean? So I would encourage communities to recognize that it's going to be a more successful program. You're going to have that trust and a better experience with it if you designate staff to manage the contract. That staff person or persons will be a champion. So I find myself championing Spin to other city officials, other city staff who still, maybe have this idea of the old, scooters everywhere, littering the streets, and someone's making money for doing that. So I'm advocating within the city, for Spin, explaining, okay, well, that was the case not that long ago, 5 years ago. That's not how it works now. That's not how Spin is. I estimate I spend about 1/3 of my time on things related to Spin. I think I could do less than that. So I think the amount of time needed depends on the size of the program and on your ambition. I feel like I have a lot of ambition, but also have other demands on my time. So I feel like I could even spend more time on it, but I could also spend less time and still feel like we have a valuable system. I think it's important to make a commitment to this in your policy and in your infrastructure. Our city ordinance right now is written in such a way that if you read it, you would think the city is terrified of these scooters and doesn't want them. So I'm working on changing that. And then mostly has to do with the rules regulating how they're parked. We need more flexibility over the parking. And then the other piece is infrastructure, again, related to parking. Denver has been putting in these bike boxes, and we're going to be putting in some like this. And this is, or parking boxes, sorry, bikes and scooters. This is just a box painted on the ground that has some symbols in it to indicate that this is where you can park your bikes and scooters. And then Spin can geofence this box and incentivize. So if you end your ride in this box, you get a credit toward your next ride. So it's just paint, and maybe if it's on the street, a couple of posts so people don't drive on it or park on it. And these don't have to be everywhere. It's still a dockless system. You could still park in front of your house, but if you park in one of these boxes, you get a little reward, and it helps to kind of reduce the clutter, we hope, and keep things more manageable for everyone. So that was what I had to say, and happy to talk more or answer questions. And I hope my screen share worked.
It did. Thank you so much, Rachel. Looks like we do have a question, and this can be for everyone, but starting with you, what has your ridership curve looked like, and how are you measuring the success of your adaptive fleets?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's gone up. It's also, it tracks with the university schedule. So about 30% of, about 1/3 of our users are undergraduates, and about 1/3 have no affiliation with the university, and the remaining third are not undergraduates, but they have some affiliation with the university. So graduate students, postdocs, faculty, staff. We were a little surprised this past summer to see that we expected our ridership to drop more than it did. It dropped a little, but then it climbed again in the summer. So showing that, yeah, people, even though the undergraduates were mostly gone, at that point, there was still a lot of ridership. So it has, it's tracked over season. Of course, when it gets very cold, it doesn't drop to zero, but it does drop pretty close to zero when it's very cold. So, but I feel like we don't really have the ability to look at trends over time at this point because it hasn't been very long. It's been a year and a half. But as far as like, I guess we feel it's a very successful program. We've had 30,000 in our first year. We had 38,000 unique riders. Sorry, we had almost, let's see here, 250,000 trips for almost 500,000 miles were taken, and we have our estimates on greenhouse gas emissions that were reduced, or CO2 emissions avoided, based on about 37 or 34% mode shift. 34% of the trips are estimated to have replaced a car trip, and that's based on our ridership survey as well as national data. The other metric I like to look at about how successful our system is we use Ride Report as the platform that Spin uses to share. It's a third-party platform. There's 2 or 3 options out there that the vendor can use to share its data with the city or the public, and some of the data shared with publicly too. So we use Ride Report. So Ride Report has I think it's called a Micromobility Index or something like that. And it calculates essentially its number of rides per capita. So you can compare, Denver to Fort Collins, for example, although Denver doesn't have Spin. But based on that metric, we're like number 6, I believe, in the nation, at least when I looked a few weeks ago. And we're ahead of Fort Collins always compares itself to Boulder. So we're ahead of Boulder actually on that index. So that's one that I'm proud of that I think is exciting.
Thank you, Rachel.
Oh, and there was also the question about the adaptive fleet.
Yes.
Yes, we do look at number of rides, and it's in the hundreds. During the year and a half that the system has been in place. We're kind of at capacity for that. That is free, and so it's based on Spin having the capacity to bring the vehicle to the person and then pick it up again. So we're kind of looking into some ways that we could expand that, such as some satellite locations, because those are big, bulky devices. So satellite locations, and maybe, I mentioned that some of these programs are actually subsidized. So that might be the thing we could think about too, or finding some kind of funding to help increase that part of it.
And Michelle, does KANcycle have any adaptive cycles?
No, we do not at this point. And I will say our ridership is very similar to what Rachel mentioned. Summer months are higher. We leave our bikes out all winter long, so people are able to use them whenever they need to. And ridership does go down, but people are still using them. So our ridership, of course, is not nearly as high as Rachel's, but we are proud of our program and the ridership that we do have.
And Al, what do you see as you all are helping to plan various programs across the U.S.?
Yeah, that's the adaptive bike question. It's a very important one, and some agencies are looking into that more closely. Unfortunately, for those who are running directly, the bike share programs, they haven't been able yet to incorporate them to the fleets. That being said, there are many programs that are running adaptive bike share programs in coordination or in partnership with local either bike share programs, bike shops, or with some community organizations. Usually they work on a more limited availability of time, recreational, on the weekends. They host, they store the bikes at a the pod or a workshop, and they make those available at a certain period of time, sometimes with pre-booking necessary, other times just like a first come first served basis during the service hours, but we haven't seen yet an adoption of adapted bikes on a massive scale. I would say maybe with the exception of Bike Town in Portland, Oregon. That's one of the biggest one. Burb in Milwaukee is another case that has been working very hard to get some of those adaptive bikes in service. Mogo in Detroit is another one that has been doing good partnerships. And then I'm aware of some programs in the suburbs of the Chicago area. Their organizations are exclusively focusing on providing adaptive cycling that's run by a bike shop. It's not part of a bike share program, but still, you know, a good way of promoting adaptive cycling in their communities.
There is another question here. Let's see. This region, which is sizable, has no organization which has stepped up to be the Regional Transportation Coordinating Council, even though the dollars are available. Any thoughts? Are those dollars to support micromobility or bike share, scooter share? And maybe it's what they're saying. If that person can elaborate. I will move to another question. Can you touch on whether you think that the various modes of micromobility have increased ridership in the overall transit system around the communities? And are people, and the second part of that, are people navigating the systems as one complete package, like a complete streets?
It's hard to say because transit ridership, you know, what its effect on transit ridership has had, because transit ridership has been a little weird the last, 3 years, kind of all over the place. But as far as the complete package, that's something we're looking into, because right now, there's the Spin app where you get your Spin bike, but then, we have the fare free system right now still in place from the start with the pandemic, and we're looking to see if it's possible to make that fare free system permanent. So that would be transit. So anyway, but we're also looking into the mobility as a service to get it integrate the Spin app integrated onto the transport app or platform, and vice versa. So ultimately, it would be nice that you could pay one fare and take care of everything. If the transit goes fare free, then we're at least taking that piece out of the equation, but it'd still be nice to have that integrated so that your trip planning could be all one thing.
Al or Rochelle?
I don't have any numbers on that either. Salina is the only community that has a fixed route service. I know adding the bike racks on the buses, we have seen substantial number of bikes on the buses. So those are full quite a bit of the time. We've seen an increase in the number of people riding bikes overall in Salina for sure. But I don't have specific numbers on how KANcycle contributes to that.
Yeah, I would say very quickly, we have seen many agencies reporting an increase in transit use. And definitely there's more and more emphasis in facilitating, as Rachel was mentioning earlier, like the integration with app, the payments, portion makes that connection much easier. So definitely there's many benefits. I don't have in front of me numbers, but I can tell you anecdotally that there has been, the more the agency is making that effort to integrate, the more, customers or riders are responding in a positive way.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the question before. So it looks like they clarified here. They were asking how to find a host in your region and with dollars to support a micromobility program. So I guess whether it would be an RPC or would it only be the city, or how do you find that right group to, start that program and support that program?
I guess I feel like this is a good option for your nonprofit, your independent nonprofit advocacy group, if you can partner with them. I mean, So I missed all the introductions. I'm not sure what everyone's roles, but you know, basically, essentially, it comes down to talking to those elected officials. Maybe a county could take it on, especially if there was maybe smaller communities who none of them felt really able to do that. Maybe a county could take that on, and then the use of geofencing, I think, can really help tailor a program to different contexts, different communities. So if you have a rural community that maybe has a bike path in a tiny little downtown, but they would be very adverse to having the bikes and scooters just anywhere, you could geofence it pretty strictly so that only the bike path or this little downtown area could be used, so that parking you could only end your ride in you know, a designated parking area, such as in a parking lot. So you know, so just having some agency or person that can do that advocacy, which as a staff person of a municipality, you may not be able to do.
So here in Kansas for KANcycle, it was a mobility manager program. So it's kind of organized by the mobility manager, who then worked with the public transportation provider in the area, and then reached out even further to those communities and those community members that are supportive of new programs in their communities. I know and then Wichita, for example, they have a community coalition that is several different groups and organizations that are around health and wellness in their community. And they are the ones that brought the bike share to Wichita, and they're the ones that manage it and handle that. There's just a lot of different ways that you could do it. You could have just a community champion. You could have a community committee. It could be a nonprofit. It could be an advocacy group. I mean, there's just so many different ways that you could structure that. You just have to have that local champion to help you get started.
And Al, what have you all seen in your work?
Yeah, I'm gonna bring up a couple of perspectives here. I agree. You know, the non-for-profit local organization or bike shops. I mean, like, think about people at bike shop already. You know, they are champions to bring together cycling by clubs, and you know, they are the ones who are definitely interested. I bring back again the idea of some incentives for bikes, you know, and e-bikes in particular, that could be channeled through them, so they could be definitely champions. Another one, just going from you know, local grassroots level to much higher level, like many states, including, you know, Kansas, Minnesota, and North Carolina, and other, have recently either created or put in more efforts into the multimodal divisions. And with that, there are more people, you know, that tend to be more on highway oriented, let's say, agencies. They're now looking into supporting bike and ped projects, you know, beyond just, you know, the regular, you know, bike lanes or designated bike routes on rural roads and so on. So maybe, you know, just try to identify who is leading that that agency or that division or department in your state DOT, and maybe you can, you know, make those funding, you know, come from the top down, and then you know, be able to implement some of those local projects, you know, supported by the state.
Great. One last question here, and then we will close up here. And we have a couple of announcements. In each of your communities, and then Al, have you seen through all of your work, are you all looking at, and Al kind of led into this, incorporating those micromobility programs and plans into a multimodal plan or to a universal mobility plan that a lot of communities and states are starting to try to build and implement?
I'll let someone else go first this time.
Well, I jump quickly. Well, that's the whole SUMC mission, right? Like creating an ecosystem of mobility options that, you know, allow people to not have to depend on their cars. So definitely micromobility, you know, takes an important part of this ecosystem, especially because, you know, capital investments are relatively low compared to other modes. It could be generated either from public sector initiative, private sector initiative, as well as, non-for-profit. So, the opportunities to put together a micromobility program at different levels is really open to the initiative. Again, the champions are kind of the leading force to make this happen, but it doesn't take, in terms of big money, it's like you're not going for the big dollars at federal level. So there are many models that people can choose from, and I think that definitely, introducing people to these options, it creates a better culture, at local level, and then when people travel, they can also see and experience micromobility in other places, and then come back home and say, hey, why don't we have something like this? And I think that that's also a big, impact. We see this just very quickly, anecdotally. A lot of ridership in big cities, for micromobility services are from casual riders, AKA visitors. So, like what you see when you visit a big city that has a, bike share program, for example, or a scooter share program, and, and you enjoy it or you try it, like you should be able to also tap into those initiatives to bring back home at least that experience.
Michelle or Rachel, are you looking at integrating to build a complete universal mobility plan or multimodal plan?
So in Kansas, I'm not 100% sure at the state level what they have in the plans, with the exception of the active transportation plan that they just announced, which does include all of those options. But they really kind of leave that to each individual community on what is best. I think as mobility managers as a group, we would probably like to see a more comprehensive plan that it does include micromobility along with public transit options, but that's something I think that we'll need to continue working towards.
Yeah, in Fort Collins, we just updated, we had a bicycle plan and a pedestrian plan. And so we combined and updated both of those and added shared micromobility to that plan as well. I feel like it's our attempt to incorporate shared micromobility into that plan. Well, we did incorporate it, but it felt like it didn't go very far. So I would hope that next time it gets maybe incorporated a bit more. But really just recognizing that shared micromobility is using that bicycle infrastructure, then I think that a lot of the bicycle specific recommendations and building out that bicycle network in particular is a lot of what is needed to incorporate shared micromobility. But there are some shared micromobility specific issues that do need to be addressed. And some of those got incorporated into our plan, at least in terms of, oh, we should probably think about this, if not specific recommendations. I don't know what's going on at the state level with that, but I doubt much of anything in Colorado as far as incorporating shared micromobility into planning.
Hey, thank you. We'll have Nellie up next for some announcements.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Please don't forget to register for our next webinar on March 22nd. Webinar 3 will focus on planning. It'll be at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Mountain, and 11 a.m. Pacific. Please scan the QR code to register, and then please do take our survey. You may also click the link in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us today. The recordings will be posted on National RTAP's website within a week. Have a great day.